Yo, 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 alright, episode 6 of FB 219 preservation. Kind of had a look through the videos last night because I was doing the last one about the acid dip into the wireframes, and I was realising it's kind of my idea of doing a preservation, just getting on the road, is getting blown out pretty quick. So it's still not going to be a full resto. It's still going to look like a bit of a patina rusty rat afterwards, but I think it's going to be more than roadworthy at the end. So anyways, part of it, so this is the after the full acid dipping and everything, this is actually the end result of the wireframes here. So I didn't get any video of the processes that I took along the way, which I've got to say I'm a little bit disappointed about, because I would have loved to show more, but I did get a lot of photos, so I'll snap and cut some photos into this video as I'm going. Basically it all started off with me having I had it up like this. This is how I first had it up so I could expose the bottom here. And so then I had to basically mark with a yellow texter where I wanted to start doing repairs to, because this was rusted around here, it was rusted around here. This side was pretty good, but actually the nut inside of there was all stripped out. Instead of being 3/8, it was much bigger. And so I just copied this whole section from that whole section and made 2 new ones. So, and this section through here had pitting, what my favorite tool was, is just to have, this really exposes any rust, just the pointy end of your panel beating hammer. And basically where it looked good, I was just starting to go around, because any bit of metal should be able to handle being hit like this. And where it started to soften and dent, or even, God forbid, go through, it's obvious it needed repair. So I just went over the whole wireframe, top to bottom, everywhere, and it exposed all the weak points, all the rusty points. And it actually, even though it looked, it looked really good beforehand, it's amazing how, just how much needed kind of working on. So anyway, I had to really think of a plan with how I'm going with this, because the wireframes, as you can see, it's a very easy piece to get out of alignment this way for the car, and all this kind of thing. And this tie member here, this is the most integral piece of the whole, let's say, 2 sides of it, because this here, once it's all welded into position, really holds this square, plumb, true, and everything where it's got to be on the car. So as soon as I decided that this needed a few repairs, I started working on it. So I'd already drilled holes like in the last video so I could access in there. It had a bit of rust up the top there, had a bit of rust there. But all in all, it wasn't a bad time, Emma, but I was really curious to see what was inside, because I got a little video camera on I don't know what you call them, but basically that you can stick up in there and add to my phone. I was just having a look around inside the chassis. So basically when I opened this up there, that's what I found inside. So it's just full of dirt, full of rust, and there's no way you're going to be getting that stuff out. So even though it wasn't too bad, I'm glad I opened this up, because it allowed me to get into the chassis to just give it a real good clean up and do what I wanted to do. All right, so the first piece I had was this, and this came off there. That allowed me to get into it. As soon as I removed this, the whole wireframes just went flopping around like a fish. So basically I've got a couple of jack stands under here and strapped this lower part down to the jack stands on the ground just to hold it somewhat rigid. So this new piece from Rare Spares, basically I had to use it as my datum, and a datum is like a working point kind of thing, because you got these tabs on that come out the side here, and so them tabs that come out the side kind of dictate your width of the subframe. So that then dictates whatever's going on with this, dictates where the side of this all lines up. And once I worked out exactly what's going on, I could just clamp this in position exactly where I wanted it in relation to these 2 sides. So then I could move on and start working on the 2 sides. While I had this open, I put rust converter and painted it and all that kind of thing. But one thing I will add about this tie member while I'm on the subject of the tie member is that, just around the front please, camera lady, is that these lugs on here, I just found they were weak, they didn't line up, nothing was really square or true. So I made the call and I put some, I think it's 3 or 4 mil, can't remember what size plate that is, but I put some nice flat plate in there, fully welded at the back and a couple of welds on the side there, just to give me a really good point there. So basically what that allowed me to do is once I had this in position and all in position with my vice grips and held, I could put 2 bolts through there, and that was holding everything really nice and tight and true before I welded it. So I'm just much happier with that because that's where the bumper bar bracket bolts through. So I just found it to be a lot better than the sheet metal that was available, and that's just a little modification I made. Yeah, so that's the tie member. I'll cut some photos in of how I did all the tie member now, so you can kind of see the process of what I did there. Righto, so once I had the tie member all worked out in the position that it was going to go, and I managed to get that vice clamped and bolted, and obviously not welded yet, I worked on what was next. And basically this section through here, I don't know, it's about 5 inches long. It was pretty thin because when I was tapping around with my hammer here, basically it started to show, you know, that it was a little bit thin there. So I cut it out and just copied it. I've got a couple of photos I'll show you next. But basically that form in there, I just needed to copy because that's the same as that side there, or, you know, this side here. That form in there I needed to copy. So this is basically just cut along the radius on the edge, straight along here, and I cut at the back there and just fully welded a plate in with that form. Now this hole here, that's a screw hole for, I think you'd call it the underbody protection plates kind of thing. That's there's just a straight hole that I drilled. I got another 1 mil piece of sheet metal, sandwiched it in and just tacked it around on the underside, drilled through the middle, split a little edge just on inside of there. I don't know if you can see, it's just a little split edge. Then I just knocked one side down with the hammer there like that. So it's replicating this side here. And so basically them screws, I believe they're like a, you know, like a self-tapper screw. I can't remember exactly from memory what kind of screws they are, but that's going to be good enough for me to replicate exactly what's happening on the other side. So now this form here, this is kind of like a, you know, early on just trying to make forms, but this is just more or less how I did it. Had this dolly. It's just a little bit of 20 mil steel kind of thing. I just radiused off the corners there the way that I wanted it, and put it in my vise, and I'll just show you quickly how it was done, just so that, you know, I'm sure everyone, you know, has done this before or something like that, but for someone who has never done it before, like me, I'm no expert, but just self-taught, it's just a matter of getting in there and having a go. So basically, so that radius there, so then this side of this hammer here is going on. Then so basically, you get the gist. Obviously, with a lot more work, you can start putting that form in that's required for these kind of sections here. Now, so you can see straight away that that's how you start getting that form, bit of radius, and it doesn't have to be, you know, perfect in any way, but the thing about it is I chose to put body deadener on this. Would I do it again next time? Oh, maybe not. It looks a little bit fucking rough, but it's on there now. Not going to remove it. But yeah, that's basically how you start getting these forms. And yeah, that's pretty simple stuff. So that was the first piece I got in there. All right, I'll just flip a couple of photos again so you can see what was done there, and I'll move on to the next bit. All right, so thinking back, that tie member and just that little piece there, that was quite a few days work for me anyway, because I was taking my time, I didn't want to make a mistake, but in saying that, it kind of like everything led on to a little bit more work along the way. So anyways, the next piece that I had to start working on was, this is off that side there, but it was the opposite one from here. This is the one that I mentioned, the bolt hole was stripped out inside of there, so I basically just went and repaired the whole section. So it was this side here, the opposite one of this was actually in pretty poor condition. So you can see the side there, that's where all the rust was along here, and that's that section that was originally outside of there. So basically what I had to do for starters there was, I just made, this is one I think didn't quite work for some reason. I made a nut, this is my first practice one. Made a section like that, just bent it all over. You know, radiused it on the top there, obviously took some measurements to see if it's going to work, and that there was my first piece to go in there. So once I then had it bolted up to my tie member, and I had the gap right for the weld at the end here, I just tacked it top and bottom there, and it was tacked top and bottom and bolted in place. So that was my very first piece that I put in. All right, so what we're picking up from is, this is the tie member is being clamped into place. This side piece is now bolted from this end here and tacked on the side. And so then I've had to work on building the strength, which is inside here, where the bolt for the bumper bar goes through. And also this is where the sway bar gets mounted up on top there. So I've had to work on that strengthening area there, and this is what I came up with. So it's basically RHS drilled, and that's essentially what I've copied there. So that went down inside of there, and yeah, so you can basically see what that is. It's no biggie, pretty basic really. So I then had this side piece and the middle strength area worked out. So then it gave me the opportunity then to work on the outside piece. So once I had the hole in the outside piece here, I could sandwich everything together with a bolt, and I'd know my final position for all of this. But the top was still exposed because then I still had to put the top plate on. All right, the side piece around here, that's just a basic form. There's no big deal about that. It's much like this section here, bent on the side there, radius at the top. You can see that kind of shape there. But the issue is this radius that forms out here, especially from this area, the bolt that swings out, there's no way I can form that smoothly with a hammer and a dolly. It's just impossible. So that's where the shrinker and the stretcher came in, well, the shrinker anyway. And I've never owned a shrinker or a stretcher tool in my life until just recently with this project. There's been some things I realised I just can't form And this is a tool that's turned into being such a valuable tool because I can just grab it and do things like this. And now I'm sure, again, most of you have seen this before, but I'll just give you a quick rundown on what's going on. So, you know, just a bit of angle that's been bashed over there. And so to get a radius like that, it's more or less, you put it in here and just start forming whatever it is you want to do. So you can see there, you know, that's giving you the form that you need in a real smooth kind of manner. And obviously that's, I just roughed that out, but I took my time with that and got the profile perfect for one side. And once I had it perfect for the other side, for one side, I basically got another piece and married it up so they're a mirror image but opposite. So basically the radiuses were both exactly the same both sides. So then I could use one on one side and one on the other and they're both exactly the same. So the old shrinker tool, it's an absolute marvel. I recommend if anyone's doing any kind of panel work at home, make the investment into shrinker stretcher. All right, so now that I've just done that, basically I'll summarise. So I formed the curve, got that into position here. I drilled the hole. Once the hole was drilled in this and it was trimmed up to where I wanted it to be, we clamped up the piece on the inside. So that was all in position there. Then once that was done, it allowed me to know exactly where this outside edge was. So I could scribe around there, clean up the outside and drill some holes in the face here. So I can basically spot weld that all in position in here. So then that left this whole assembly then in position and where I wanted it to be, just with the top plate not on there. So then it was just time to work on the top plate, which was basically a plate that was here, an angle on it, bent up. I could clamp that off to the tie member and get that in position. And then I fully welded it and cleaned it up. So that's how I managed to get together and replicate these pieces, which were, again, took quite a lot. There's many days work in all of that because it's trial and error, you know, a couple of mistakes, had to remake some stuff, you know, got a couple of silly little measurements wrong, do it all again. But it all worked out really well in the end. So that's how I got these side types, I guess you call them subframes, done anyway. So. All right, so basically other little job just to finish this area off here was these are the mounts for your sway bar mount here. And so because these areas were kind of like, they sit like that on the car, so that's upside down. So these areas here can hold a little bit of moisture. And this basically is poked up inside of there like that. So these sway bar mounts are actually very thin and rusted on the end here. And they're not serviceable, so I had to do a quick repair on that. So basically I just cut flush off there and got a little bit of 3mm angle iron, 3mm thick angle iron, and put a patch in up here, fully welded in there, and which has allowed me to create the tongue or the lip to be able to get that in there to use these again. So that then finishes off this whole repair here. And yeah, no, pretty happy with that job so far. So, alrighty, so moving on. So I finally had all of these areas, both sides here, fully welded in position. I had the tie rod, yeah, this piece, I've forgotten the name off the top of my head, vice grip clamped into place and bolted. So I didn't want to fully weld this on the ground because as I was saying, the whole thing was still moving a lot. And if I fully welded this, it wouldn't have lined up with the car. So that was just clamped up. So while it was upside down, there's a piece, this is where your rubber mounts go that come from your front end and mount the front end up to the Y-frames. This piece inside here on this one corner was absolutely really rusted, and it had holes through. I tried to basically just fill it up with a bit of weld, but it kept blowing out, so I had to do another repair. So basically, luckily enough, I have a few pieces knocking around because I believe that it doesn't matter what you've got on these old cars, it's worth holding on to because you just don't know what you want. So I had a cut that was basically through here of a Y-frame, and it's totally useless to anyone, but I managed to get a good piece of one of these out to do a repair with. So basically I had my Dremel with a little tiny cutting disc on the end of it, and I just cut around in corners on that top edge there, cut. And then had my file sander and got the file sander in and broke any welds on there. Then managed to pop this whole piece out. So you can see where the cut marks are there. And oh, sorry, I used a Christmas tree drill there just to go in and break the weld. So I managed to pop this whole piece out and get the new one in, fully weld it, nice and strong. Weld it on the bottom the same way it was from the factory. Then use the file sander to make a radius on the outside there. So yeah, so that's a really good repair that needed doing, and I'm sure there's a lot of front ends out there that have got this problem, and you don't even know you got the problem unless you separate the front end off the Y-frame and take the rubber out and all that kind of thing. But this was actually dreading me a bit because I was thinking, how the hell am I going to fix that? But to be honest, once I worked out the plan, it was actually one of the simplest repairs on the whole front end. So it's funny how the things that you think are going to give you problems are just kind of, they're just very straightforward. So that's that one. Alright, then while the Y-frame is still up on its end like this, I did a repair to this leg here because this leg was actually dented, had some big dents in there. I think someone maybe tried to jack it up from this leg or something in the past. But this is a really straightforward repair. I just cut along there and like a not quite 90 degrees, and it's got a little bit of a twist in it, but just tacked it all in and fully welded it and cleaned it off. So that's a nice little repair on the leg there. And yeah, so that saved me from doing a bigger job or paying rare spares for a repair panel there. It was a bit of a small win. And then after that, I worked on flipping it over, which I'll do now, and we'll continue talking. Alright, once I had all that done, from the underneath, flipped it over. Now still remembering I had all this clamped vice grips and bolted at the front there. It was actually holding it very rigid, but it was time to get all of this fully welded into place. Now I had all the holes there pre-drilled ready for my spot welds, and along here. And so basically I then got out my engine crane. I had this radiator support panel sitting in there. And also I made up a bit of a frame for the back here, which was more or less going like this, sitting in there like that. Might be that way, a bit of a different angle. Yeah, sitting in there like that, and it allowed me to run a strap from here to the radiator support, lift it up with my engine crane, and get it around to the front of the car here and dummy it up and get it all bolted up where I wanted it by 4 places on the dog legs here, and the back sections here that align it with the firewall, and a couple of screws there. So I had all the everything all bolted up to the car, like to match the car, because as we all know, 1960s, I could weld all this true, square and plumb out here and it will never fit the car because nothing's true, square and plumb on that. So basically I've got it all bolted up exactly where the car wanted it, and it was amazing how rigid it just went. Like I released all the clamps and everything, and it's like I literally, from the front here, because there's 3 points of being fixed in 3 points here, there was just simply no movement out here whatsoever. So the car held it exactly where it wanted to. I did a couple of measurements square, you know, it was all good enough for 1960s, but even if I wanted to move it, I wasn't moving it. So I was happy with that, and so then I just basically went along and started fully welding everything, clamping everything, fully welding all the front here, making sure that was all good. And then the front end, the wireframes came back off, so I could continue on with the next few repairs which I had to do on the top, which was around the battery box area actually, so I'll show you that next. Alright, so once I had the wireframes all fully welded around the tyre member and that at the front, basically everything was all nice and tight, and this is essentially how it came off the car, and it's just, yeah, everything's all rigid and true. So I took it off the car just to let it relax from the vehicle. Then once it was off, I went to mount it back up to the car, and it mounted straight back on the car and everything aligned. So I was really happy with that before I went any further with it and make sure that it was going to work. So yeah, no, it's really good. So once then I had it flipped up this way, the major issue with the rest of the wireframes from the top end up here was the battery tray area. Now this is not uncommon. 1960s batteries, all the acid always was overflowing. This is actually a good tray. This is a tray that I was going to replace with, but the old one was non-existent. And so this is the area from around inside there. You can see where that hole is and where that hole is. It's basically fully pitted, and yeah, my hammer was just going through that area, so there was no choice but to have a repair on it. And the other part that was basically in poor condition was this here, which goes that piece there. You can see there it's just pitted, rusted, and yeah, it's in need of repair. So basically I was looking at all this stuff and you know, thinking about doing a repair in there. It was just going to be too thin and it would have been shit. So basically with this piece here, just got a bit of sheet metal. I've got some dollies, put them in the hydraulic press, formed in some, well, it's just some strengthening recesses in there, and managed to form up this whole piece just on the flat anvil and some basic tools. And yeah, so that was a really good win for that. That was like, I don't know, about 3-4 hours work to get all that finished off. And yeah, so I'll just show all the photos of that process at the end. But actually I got a step ahead of myself there. Beforehand I had to make the pieces to go along the bottom here and along the bottom there, and basically just do a bit of basic forming. I formed this the same manner that I showed you earlier on the other piece. Then this area here was basically, I was just forming it whatever way I could really. Like if I found that you know, like a hammer would give me the right kind of radius in there, then I'd use whatever I could to get that radius and lay it in there, and just from the outside tap it around and use that radius to give me the form. I was finding that my spanner kit, just the Sidcombe ring end spanners, because they all come in different sizes, different diameters. They were the ones that were kind of like, if I needed a different shape or form, you know, get a small one, get a large one, and they're the ones that I was using for dollies to get the radiuses done. So this piece in here, and the radius, compound radius, there's different radius there to different radius on the outside there. This is actually a bit of a stress in there because there's a lot going on and a lot that's got to all be matched up. And you know, it's certainly no professional repair, but it's all strong, all the welds are 100%, and you know, it doesn't match up perfectly, but I'm actually not fussed about it because it's covered up. So this is the new tray that I made. Basically, I've decided to not do the drain hole in the middle there, like that tray, because the batteries in 2020 are 100 times better than the batteries in 1960, so I'm not expecting massive acid overflows and overcharges from the old generator on the motor, all these kind of things. The 6-volt system in these on the day, or this could be 12, I can't remember exactly, but they basically were pretty fucking shit. So it's all improved a lot now, and so I'm not expecting the big acid overflows. And plus, if it does overflow, I want the acid to eat this out, because I can make another one of these in a couple of hours in the shed, but I don't want to really be repairing this again. So I'm going to leave, not putting the hole in there, because I don't want that, if any acid does overflow and run out, I don't want it running down to here. So this is going to be sacrificial for me, and this is basically where, in a nutshell, that goes in there. So more than happy with that end result there. That's really good, and by the time I get this tray all prepped, primed and painted, you're not even going to see the area in there that I've been working on. So it's been covered up with a battery, you're going to have wiring running around in here. So yeah, I'm really happy with that result there. That's a good one. And as a reference, that repair there was probably a week of my time, because again, experimental, getting angles wrong, trying to get everything to match up as best as I possibly could, meant remaking it, straightening it, bending it down a few more mil, getting it up, getting all the radiuses right. And it got to a point there where actually I went, I think I've bitten off more than I can chew here. I've stuffed this up. It's above my skill level and all that kind of thing, but I ended up having a good night's rest, because I think I was getting a bit fatigued on the job, coming back out here one day, and when it just got to get this done, and then bang, it just snapped into place. Everything just fell into place. So yeah, it's like, if you get to a point where you want to give up, just have a rest and it'll come to you eventually. So that was that, and I'll flip through some photos now of the battery tray process, what I used. Actually, just come around the other side here and just show punters how the other side all looks. So this is the back area of the repair here. So basically, it's a weld that runs up here. You can see that's what I've formed. That's the radiuses there I've formed with the spanners, and it's fully welded right across here, down, and underneath in here too. So yeah, it's all 100% on the welds, and also the body deadener makes it look neat as well. So another repair that I'm absolutely sure that it's going to be as good as any shop that would have pumped it out anyway. So no, very happy with that. I'll flip through the photos now so you can see what I've done. Alright, so that recap was just a good couple of weeks of work for me to get everything done. So the next part then was, it was pretty much finished and I need to get it painted. So obviously the metal and everything was still looking pretty rough, pretty rusty and things like that. So I was just using things like my old 60 grit sanding discs, you know, fold them over, you can really get in there and it's nice and stiff and you can kind of give the metal a good rub. Bit of 120 general purpose sanding grit, you know, your Scotch-Brite pads, just did whatever I could to get in, and especially in this engine bay area, I took it all back to bare metal because I'm trying to just make it look as neat as possible, and I think it looks pretty good. The outside I did also a lot of roughing up as well, but just made it good enough, obviously because I was covering the outside with sound body deadener, that it didn't need to be as perfect as inside the engine bay. So once it was all back to metal and prepped as well as I wanted it to do, I've been using, you've probably seen some of this before, but this Worth rust converter. This is, I've messed around with a few rust converters and a fella online, Johnny, put me onto this. This stuff is a non-acid rust converter. It's it's basically, it looks like milk. You put it on and it just converts everything straight back to blackness. Now, camera lady, do you want to just turn around and show the firewall? Now this here, this firewall, for example, this was, I sandblasted this and I actually left it for a few days, and anyway, so long story short, I just wanted to protect it. But this is that milk coloured rust converter. I just with a Scotch-Brite, I put all this on and I started scuffing this back already, but that's the finish, bare metal, what this rust converter does. It's fucking amazing stuff. I will never use another rust converter ever again. So anyways, I took all this back to rust converted the whole frame, gave the scuff up with the rough red, purple, whatever you want to call it, Scotch-Brite. I won't do it now because it's finished. Scuffed it all up and then basically edge primed it. So I did painting years ago as a young lad, but it's not something that I'm good at. But so anyways, a mate of mine, Damo's a spray painter. I said to him, look, tell me what gun I need that's easy. I'm just going to be using acrylic or GMH flat black or etch primer, maybe even some acrylic primer. I just want a gun that's going to do the lot. I'm not a pro, I just want something that's simple to use. And I don't care if I get some runs or I stuff it up, so I can always rub that back with acrylic later. So he just recommended this Star spray gun. It's like 170 bucks or something, you know, a little bit of money involved with it, but it's a 2mm tip. It's bigger than I would have thought ever I would have needed. But mate, good for your etches, good for all your undercoats, good for spray putty, and but also that, like, it reckons that it'll be fine for doing the acrylic paint if I want to do some little areas anyway. So I'm happy with that, and this is what I've been using so far to get all this done. So I sprayed it all in etch primer, gave it a little scuff back, and any bare metal then I just gave it another second coat in etch, and basically from there I did the whole body. The second, so this is the etch primer I've been using, just a Wattle Super Etch. So that's like a ready to use kind of thing. You can thin it down 10% if you want, but that's just a bloody, yeah, it's good stuff actually. And it's only like 45 bucks for 4 litres, it's not bad. So once I had everything all etched, I chose to do all the body deadener all over and underneath. I was experimenting a little bit with the finish, and yeah, would have I gone so hard on it next time? Probably not, because it does make it look a little bit, I don't know, it's not perfectly smooth like the engine bay. It would have been nice to have all that perfectly smooth, but it's done now, so I'm going to leave it. But this is the stuff, water-based stone guard, that's what I've been using there. I found it's a little bit thick straight out of the can, so what I was doing was basically getting a bucket of really hot water and just leaving it soak in there for like half an hour beforehand, and just trying to get a bit of heat in it, give it a good shake up and stuff like that, and it kind of came out a bit smoother afterwards. So yeah, that was the underside, and then I was going to do the GMH flat black inside the engine bay, all around here and around the front. But I had some overspray from the stone guard all in these areas in here, and I wasn't happy with it. It actually looked a little bit fucking shit. So I just sanded all these flat areas all out again, got the stone guard out of the areas where I wanted to get it out, and then hit it up with the GMH flat black. Now, this is the same thing. This is like 45 bucks or something for 4 litres. just general stuff. The one thing I learned about this is it's not acrylic, it's like a nitro paint. I can't remember the exact name of the paint, but it's the paint they were using like real early, pre-acrylic, is like in the 1920s up to 1960s or something like that. I tell you fucking what, you want to have a mask on doing this stuff, because this is toxic shit, man. Yeah, I had a really good quality mask, and it wasn't until I took the mask off afterwards and walked in the shed where I could smell it. It's like, whoa, mate, it's like head spins. It was pretty full on stuff, so just be really careful when you're using this stuff. But anyways, the GMH flat black, that went over the etch primer, and that's the finish that I've got here now. So I'm more than happy with all this, and it's been a finished job. So when I got it outside, you'll probably see some glossy looking stuff there. When I got it outside, I had some Penetrol. I had the wireframe standing up on its end. I sprayed some Penetrol down in the legs here, and you can see here where basically the Penetrol's come through all the seams, which has done exactly what it's meant to do. It's worked its way through the seams and it's ran down and just dribbled. So yeah, that looks a little bit average. It's not exactly how I want it, but Penetrol can be painted over, and I think before I put this on the car, I'll just have to give it another dose over in flat black, and maybe, you know, just give it a little sand down if I have to, if that's going to be a problem. So yeah, I'll get this all worked out and add a few more photos now of that process as well. But yeah, that's a wrap on the wireframes. So I'm more than happy with all that, and yeah, it would have been good to get some more videos along the way, but that's basically a recap on it all. So no worries, we'll catch us after.